Further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speaker today, Monique Hammond. Monique Hammond is a registered pharmacist who lost hearing in her left ear from a loud folk rock band at a church fundraiser over 10 years ago. The incident became a life changer. She had to quit her job at the University of Minnesota Hospital Pharmacy. Monique had graduated with high distinction from University of Minnesota College of Pharmacy. After losing hearing, she did 5 years of research and wrote the book, What Did You Say? An Unexpected Journey into the World of Hearing Loss, first and second editions. Monique was appointed by the governor to the Commission of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing Minnesotans, is that right? As I say it, where she completed 2 terms as vice chair. She is also past president of the Minnesota chapter of the Hearing Loss Association of America. Monique speaks regularly to employees and members of the public about hearing loss and the dangers of loud noise. Monique is a Rotarian between clubs currently and has spoken in person and via Zoom to over 200 Rotary clubs across the US, Canada, and other countries. I will post a link in the chat box to her, a link for you to follow up for more information, as well as her email if you'd like to follow up with her. So without further ado, please welcome Monique.
Well, good afternoon. I thank you so very much for your invitation to Zoom with you on a topic that became so fast, so dear to my heart. And that is, of course, the topic of hearing loss. And so before we even start, I would like to say that in general terms, if anybody is out there who all of a sudden feels that the hearing isn't anymore what it used to be, and it starts to interfere with people's lives, then it is very important to get a hearing test done, a professional test which goes beyond listening to beeps. So anyway, because whenever anything else is wrong with our body or doesn't seem to be going that way, we go and get a test and we ask somebody to help us. So, and hearing isn't any different. And so today we'll talk about hearing loss as being a silent epidemic. And I'm mostly going to be addressing the type of hearing loss that we acquire in life, as opposed to the hearing loss that we might be born with. And so hearing loss is indeed something where I found out very quickly that there is much more to it than not hearing so terribly well. And so it is the numbers of those with hearing loss are on the rise, and that is a worldwide kind of a thing. And so the World Health Organization has already declared the increasing numbers of hearing loss as a serious public health issue. And so that is what we're looking at this point in time. Now, I found out very quickly that hearing loss changes lives, and not necessarily for the better. And so, yes, as you were just told by Amy, by profession, I'm a hospital pharmacist. And then one day I went suddenly deaf in my left ear in a matter of 4 hours. And so it went very fast. And that tells us already that hearing loss might not always conveniently happen over a lifetime, like what we kind of oftentimes expect, or what we are saying. Oh, I don't have to worry about that. I am still young. It can go very fast if the conditions are right. And so, according to my physicians, a very loud sound exposure that I had the day before, actually at a church fundraiser of all places, greatly contributed to my problems, because they said, no matter what might have been going on in that ear already, what do we know? A virus? Yeah. Or maybe some kind of a pre-existing condition. They said that that loud sound insult really put me over the top because it overloaded and caved the whole system. And so I knew immediately that my job was on the line, because in my profession, I have to hear accurately. And if I sit there guessing and misunderstanding what people are saying to me, or even the doctors, well, then I can put people at risk and I can seriously hurt them. And so I needed a plan B for my life. And then I found out that I also had a lot to learn, because in spite of my profession, I really didn't know that much about what happened to me and how it was going to be affecting my life. But as I began to learn, all of a sudden, I had all of these little pieces of the puzzle fall into place. And so I like to say that education actually set me free. And so my message is one, yes, of education. We have to learn about this. It is also one of prevention, because there is stuff that we can do, but it is also one of massive empowerment, and not only one for ourselves, but also for the people around us. Like, how about our children and grandchildren who are really totally at risk, as I am even talking to you. And so my new mission in life became one then to keep people of all ages hearing better and longer, and that is what gets me into into the communities and in with the service groups, but also in with the, with the industry, where I just love doing safety presentations for people who have their good hearing at risk every day because of loud jobs. Now, why do we call it a silent epidemic? Well, because mostly hearing loss that we acquire is mostly the result of silent and invisible injury that happens throughout the whole hearing system. And if it gets bad enough, that can also lead to disability. And so hearing loss is oftentimes called the silent disability. And it affects people of all ages. And so by now, 1 in 5 Americans, according to Johns Hopkins Medicine, 1 in 5 Americans age 12, think about that, these are school-age children. But 1 in 5 age 12 and over has hearing loss enough to interfere with daily communication. And so hearing loss is first and foremost a communication issue. And what people struggle the most with is the understanding of speech in the least amount of background sound. And so now you can imagine our kids sitting in the schools, in the noisy classrooms and in the virtual classrooms. And what they are doing is already struggling with understanding the details of what is being taught to them. And so imagine what that does for their education and then also for their future. Now, there are many issues that hearing loss does to us. It affects quality of life at any age and almost immediately, because it is a communication problem. And so it affects people socially and emotionally. And so they come to our support group meetings in Minneapolis and they say that they are always feeling on the outsides, kind of on the periphery, of talking, of having activities with people that they might actually know for quite some time, like their friends, like their families and all of that, but also, as I found out, their people, their buddies at work. And so that gets people depressed, and the world of hearing loss is full of depressed people that isolate themselves further and further. And so hearing loss is also known as seriously an isolating disorder. And so now that we have this COVID thing going on and on and on, and we also have to kind of socially distance and isolate ourselves oftentimes, we can get a little bit more empathy for those in our midst who have hearing loss and who are really being faced with that issue. And so with the mask wearing, of course, and we have to continuously wearing those masks because we do not want to put ourselves or others at risk. And so with the mask wearing, of course, there is also another thing that is knocked out for people with hearing loss, and that is, of course, the famous lip reading or speech reading, because now we are hiding the face and we cannot read those lips anymore. But there are masks out there that enable us to read those lips. And they have been actually around in the healthcare system for some time, because people oftentimes have to go to appointments where people are talking to them, like radiologists and dentists. And you don't know what they are talking. People oftentimes don't even have a clue that anybody is talking to them unless they see those lips move. And so this is an FDA approved actually mask that lets the lips be seen. There are also, if you go and Google them, there are other ones that have a little bit of a bigger panel, but they have to fit around the face in order to be protective. And so I don't get paid by these people for showing this. This is just a show and tell. I'm trying to pay forward what I have learned. So I tell people with hearing loss, go and invest in a couple of masks, those of your choice, and then take them with you to these appointments, because don't expect for anybody to accommodate you anytime too fast, because hearing loss in general principles is not on the radar screen of many people, including doctors and nurses and ER physicians and so forth. So take responsibility and at least get yourself a chance of understanding. I also found out fast that hearing loss affected me professionally and financially. Oh, yes. And I took major hits on both sides, and I don't wish them on anyone. But now the Johns Hopkins researchers are looking into another quality of life issue, and that is the possible ties between hearing loss and dementia, and who wants to go there? And so these are all reasons of why we have to protect the hearing that we have today, as we are sitting here today, so that we can hear better tomorrow and that we can keep on hearing. And we also have to get engaged on preventing hearing loss in any which way that we can. Because there are many reasons for people to have hearing loss, and they run the gamut literally from earwax plugs all the way to brain tumors. And so for this slide, I organized things a little bit alphabetically, should I say. The most commonly cited causes at least. And so aging, of course, when I do that, comes out on top because it starts with A, but also aging is still worldwide the leading cause of hearing loss because baby boomers are aging and aging. And of course, we are also living so much longer. The second leading cause of hearing loss worldwide is excessively loud sound. And of course, our world is getting louder by the day, and we are actually becoming increasingly reckless with our sound exposures. And so that is, of course, where I am having my focus, because this is totally preventable. It doesn't have to be that way, because excess noise brings something on that is called noise-induced hearing loss. And it is the same damage as hearing loss of aging, except for it is a premature and an accelerated aging of the ears. And so an audiologist told me, yeah, she said, I have patients who are in the 25 to 30-year-old age group who already have these problems. They're still in school, young in their jobs, and their age might be 25, but their ears are functioning more on the age of a 45 to 50 and even older person. So younger people with old ears, that's becoming increasingly a problem. And so the doctor told me, yeah, noise-induced hearing loss is entirely preventable. And so as the world is getting louder, he said, it becomes increasing more and more a matter of choice. People have to make the choice what they want to do about this. Because when it comes to all of these reasons of why we have hearing loss, I tell you, there is not so much that we can do about anything really, except for working maybe with an earwax plug or maybe with an infection. But when it comes to how loud our lives are, how loud we make them for ourselves, then we have actually a lot of power over the sound volume in our lives. So what can we do? Well, we can choose not to go to those loud venues that we know all too well, the loud concerts, and now that the sports bars are kicking in again, they are notorious for all of this noise, right? Where we have to yell and scream. And then also the loud churches, all of those places. If we do go, we can choose to protect ourselves the way we would be doing at work. Mother Nature doesn't care, on the job, off the job, it's all the same to her. And so, but most people never even look at the back of the package of an earwax, of an earplug package, in order to see how to apply those things correctly so that they actually help. We can also choose to turn down the volume when you're in charge. We can get away from the sound system. We can do a lot of things, but what is our choice? And do we choose also to pay forward what we learn and know to our children and our grandchildren? And so I like to say, we like to talk about things, we talk about hearing loss and about how it affects us and how terrible it is. And basically, I don't want these all to come down to sort of a blah, blah, blah session, because I would like people to understand what is actually happening here. And so you're looking now at the diagram that I actually made for the book that was briefly mentioned before. And so that people can, it's very simplified and people can actually follow along. And so when it comes to noise-induced hearing loss and hearing loss of aging, the damage is in the same place, namely with the middle ear and then also with the hearing nerve, which is basically an electrical cord tying the whole thing to the brain. And so the inner ear is this larger structure. You see loop-de-loops here on top. We don't talk about those. They are for balance and equilibrium. We're going to be talking about the snail-shaped organ here on the bottom, which is actually the hearing organ of the inner ear. And it is called the cochlea. And cochlea in Latin simply means snail. And so I think there is no reason to doubt why it was called that, because it just looks like a snail. And so we have two of those cochleas, one for each ear. And these cochleas are the size of a pea. Like in peas and carrots, everything is very small here and not built for the abuse that we're actually submitting it to. So anyway, so inside of each cochlea, though, we have some 20,000 or so very finely tuned and rather fragile hearing cells that run along that snail curvature. And that's all we get for a lifetime, from the time that we are born to the time that we die, maybe at 105, who knows? And if we only have 20,000 or so cells per ear for that span of time, that's actually not that many. But when those cells become damaged, and though they may be even dying, that's the way they remain in us humans, because in mammals, they do not rejuvenate themselves spontaneously the way they do in birds and fish. And so we, of course, have research going on. Why not, right? And so a researcher told me, yeah, technically we can regrow these hearing cells. But he said, there is this big glitch. We have to make them work the way their dead and dying forefathers did. And that's what is still sort of standing there as an obstacle. And so it's going to be a while for us before we kind of are going to be the beneficiary of all sorts of miracles. However, it is these 20,000 or so hearing cells that we have per ear that are going to be changing now the sound that has traveled their way, through the air and through the ear and finally has arrived at the cochlea. Well, those cells are going to translate that sound energy into electrical signals. Now, Mother Nature gave us a natural transducer, and that is the ear. And changing the one type of energy into a different type of energy is phenomenally difficult to do for Mother Nature, but that's the system with which we are interfering. And so now those electrical signals that are generated in the ear, they will now travel to the brain, to the hearing portion of the brain. And they travel there by means of that hearing nerve, that electrical cord that is going to be transferring those signals. And it is actually in the brain that those signals are going to be interpreted. They're going to be decoded, if you will. And so in so many ways, we hear with our brain. And so people come to me and they say, well, yeah, I can understand that as I'm aging and everything else is flapping out on my body. I can also understand that these hearing cells are taking a hit. But how come that noise is so tremendously toxic? And for that, we have to remember that a sound wave is a pressure wave. And it is that sound pressure that is giving sound its volume, its oomph, if you will, but it is also that pressure that becomes so tremendously toxic. And so as it gets loud out there with every single repeated and prolonged exposure to excessively loud sound, these hearing cells are beaten down over and over until they bend and they snap, and many might not be coming back to their previous level of functioning. And so then one of those days, we might be ending up with symptoms of hearing loss, where all of a sudden the world has gone dull on us because we have gone down from healthy hearing cells, bam, 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 until maybe we have a severe damage situation going on, like what I have in my ear. And believe me, you can all see that there is not much standing anymore that is supposed to be helpful. And that it might be very difficult for hearing aids, for instance, to be helpful for me because there is not much to work with anymore. Because remember, no matter how good hearing aids become, no matter how much they become, digitized and Bluetooth enabled and all of that, they are still aids that help us make the most of the hearing that we have. And that's another reason of why we should be really watching out to keeping our hearing the way we have it right now, this minute. Because what do people say? Well, they say that life has lost its treble. That's probably the best explanation that somebody mentioned one time in a meeting. Because everything is dull sound, speech, music, people seem to mumble. We can't understand speech in background sound anymore, and so on and so forth. And people who have hearing loss, who have already hearing damage, also oftentimes complain about tinnitus or tinnitus, that buzzing and that ringing and that roaring. And I mean, those noises in the ear and in the head, as we call them. And so we should always find out what might be causing this, because there are different types of tinnitus, there are different reasons for getting it. But in over 90% of the cases, it is actually already due to some hearing damage and already to some hearing loss. Okay, so what actually we are listening to does not come from the ear itself, it comes already from the brain. And so we have to kind of tie into that message, because I tell you, if we do not, then the more we damage our hearing, the worse the tinnitus becomes. And so oftentimes people tell me that the tinnitus is actually bothering them more than the hearing loss that is actually maybe causing it. And so that Mother Nature is talking to us, because we do not only damage ourselves, we also damage the nerve, because those sound pressure waves are carrying through and actually starting to erode and disconnect the hearing cell from the hearing nerve. Is that good? I don't think so. And so as because we are actually doing those disconnects and we have nerve damage and we have cell damage, I think it becomes clear why those electrical signals that are and the sound energy that we're getting out of it, why that is all of a sudden all wishy-washy and it is weak, and why speech every day more and more turns into gibberish. And so yes, noise-induced hearing loss is permanent. Remember, we are doing research. It is cumulative. We are piling on the damage, but it is preventable. That's why we talk about it, learn about it, Zoom about it. Because we have to become engaged. For the unprotected, overloaded, and abused human ear, excessively loud sound is not entertaining, fun, useful, or even macho. What are we thinking of? You know, the only thing that unprotected human ear becomes over time is overloaded, and we are losing our good portion of our good hearing prematurely, and also we are damaging our good quality of life prematurely. But remember, life is choices. And so there is another toxic myth and falsehood that should be, kind of nixed right now, and that is that the unprotected, overloaded human ear ever gets used to loud sound. No, it doesn't get used to loud sound. Tolerant to it, immune to it, all of those things. Resistant to it. Hello, that is not what's happening. The only thing the human ear becomes to it is the deafer to it. Deafer and deafer and deafer. Until pretty soon nothing bothers us anymore, but life is also not so much fun anymore. And so we have to prevent, we have prevention strategies, and people say, I would like to protect myself, but how can I do that? If you ever go into a place, wherever it is, at the church or at the concert or we have those holiday parties that we used to have where it was incredibly loud. If you stand at 3 to 5 or maybe 6 feet from somebody and you have to yell and scream over the noise in order to just be heard, then you're in a toxic industrial strength noise environment, and it's time to take action. Get out of there, protect yourself, get away from the sound source, do something. Then we also have the smartphone apps that we can download for our smartphones, and they tell us, how loud it is out there, and even sound the alarm when it gets to be too loud. But the app has to be supported by the phone that we have, and so an iPhone needs an i-compatible app. A Droid needs a Droid-compatible app, and so on, or else we do not get exact measurements, because the big variation between all of those things, these instruments, is the sensitivity and the clarity of the microphones. Now, when it comes to MP3 players, yes, they are still out there. We can also crank up the telephone with our music as loud as we can possibly do it, right? And so when it comes to those MP3 players, then we have the 60-60 rule, because the manufacturers are not telling us how much these things are pumping out, and many of them can be pretty noxious. And so out of the research that has been done, that 60-60 rule means that we have to limit our sound exposure, the volume, but also our exposure time. So the first 60 is that when it comes to the volume dial, then about 60% of the volume dial, that's about where we hear a lot, we hear plenty, but we are not immediately in danger, at least for the instruments that were tested by all of these specialists. So 60% of the volume dial, that's the max, and then we're listening for about an hour, 60 minutes at a time, and then we take these earbuds out, and we're going to give those ears and that brain a very well-deserved rest. And if you like to go to concerts, and people like to do that, live concerts and so forth, and with summer coming on, we're going to do that again, then investigate, Google, and have a night. You can have a whole day of entertainment just Googling hearing protection. And so this time we're Googling musicians' earplugs, or also called high fidelity earplugs, because they take the level down overall. You hear everything, but you hear it at a lower level. They do not clip sound left and right the way some of the other hearing protection can do. And so Mother Nature does not care whether we're listening to Beethoven or whether we're listening to Twisted Sister. It doesn't make any difference to her. It is how loud it is and for how long it is going on. And so hearing is a precious sense, and this is why I come to Rotarians in order to help me spread the word about this silent epidemic in our communities, in our own families. And so learn about it and pay forward what you learned. You can pay forward what you learned here from me today. It's a beginning, you know, but it is at least a good start to a conversation. Or you can also pay my name forward, because I'm already out there doing all of this work with the communities and with the industry. And so give my name to another Rotary Club or to another social group that you might be belonging to, or maybe to some employer who wants to be having a little bit more education for the employees. But oftentimes we also have to look at ourselves. We have to bring it back home. Might we even contribute to this silent epidemic? Like, for instance, for the last holidays, what did we bring home? The incredibly loud toys and game consoles for the children and for the teenagers. Maybe we invested in this small but exceedingly loud amplifier for the home stereo that we then crank up to the last notch so that the walls are shaking and we are feeling the movie. And so we have to kind of think about that, get that introspection going. You know, how loud are our Rotary events? That's another good question. You know, we kind of have to keep this at home also. And so Rotarians do all this so well, and then they take it into the communities and so on. And why would they be doing that? Because this all comes under the mantra of service above self. Because all we try to do here is to keep people of all ages, our children, hearing better and longer. And so I consider any kind of noise management that we can do, any kind of information that we can get and pay forward, I consider those investments. This time, it's an investment in quality of life for now and for the future, so that indeed we will be hearing so much better and so much longer. And so that the day will never, ever come when the music just simply dies. And so that's what I have for you. And so if you have a question for me, or you can email to me. You can also go on my website. I write blogs about all sorts of things when it comes to hearing, even research and so on. And so, you know, I love all those clicks.